Fragmented. Welcome to Born Extinct, my journey into my acknowledgement of my ancestors and authentic spiritual self. My name is Ancestral, and I was born extinct. Apartheid ended in 1994 in South Africa, but this has done very little to change the conditions of Indigenous people. The vast majority of my people are still trapped in poverty and crime and has very little access to education. In 1948, 16 years before my birth, apartheid, an extension of colonization, became law. I was born in District 6 to an Khoi mother and an Xhosa father, 300 years after the barbaric colonization policy of ethnic cleansing started. District 6, as we still call it, is in the center of Cape Town. It was named the 6th Municipal District in 1867. It was a vibrant mix of freed enslaved people, merchants, artisans, laborers, and immigrants. The Group Areas Act was passed in 1966, condemning the already dispossessed people of District 6 to so much more suffering. The forced removals was met with fierce resistance, but in 1968, the apartheid state started demolitions and the community's fate was sealed. We were forcibly removed to an area 32 kilometers outside the city called the Cape Flats. Upon registration of my birth, I was registered colored, a label I was to spend my entire life despising. And so began my life as an extinct person with no ethnicity, no traditions, no history, no land, and no sense of belonging. Shortly after his arrival in 1652, the Dutch invader Jan van Riebeeck built his first apartheid border to keep out the native landowner and to cut the Cape off completely from the rest of Africa. The first time the word apartheid was used was in 1917, 2 years before Jan Smuts became Prime Minister. Although gladly implemented and enjoyed by descendants of both the Dutch and the British, apartheid was the legacy of British colonization. They first introduced pass laws for all native people in the Cape and Natal during the 19th century. I was told that my ancestors were hunter-gatherers. I would spend many decades trying to work out what it is that a hunter-gatherer actually does. The fact that my ancestors did nothing more than hunt, gather, drink, have sex, and be villainous didn't make any sense to me, as I only know my people as being hardworking, conservative, kind-hearted, accommodating, and God-fearing. According to the Oxford Dictionary, a hunter is a person who hunts wild animals for food or sport. The Khoi doesn't fit this description, as we don't hunt except for ceremony, rituals, or when it's absolutely necessary. This was never necessary, as there was enough fruit, roots, nuts, and vegetables available in abundance before colonization. A hunter-gatherer is a person who do not live in the same place, but move around and live by hunting, fishing, and gathering plants, so that the Khoi scavenged is simply untrue. By the time the Germans took over our kraal, the place we call home, to kill, enslave, and indenture, the house of my great-great-grandmother, built with rocks and clay, was already quite old. This house, where she lived with her 11 children, were the home that we would come to know as our ancestral home. She assisted the Germans to build churches and a school which celebrated its 200th birthday in September 2017. Behind my great ancestral home is a sacred hill we call the Kopi, where prior to the settler arrival, the Ataqua community had celebrations and rituals. When they arrived, the Kopi became a 24-hour lookout point for slavers, trophy hunters, and pedophiles, and those who just loved to decapitate body parts for European art. Our people live very long lives. I still have living relatives who have witnessed those atrocities. The farmers who remain on Atakwa land, on whom Indigenous people depend for seasonal work, remains as barbaric as they were 400 years ago. My people fear white people so much more than they fear poisonous snakes, tigers, cheetah, and other wild animals. We believe that all living beings have empathy. Throughout my childhood, in the 60s and 70s, I became fascinated with my relatives who could not speak, a result of their tongues and lips being cut out for speaking our indigenous languages, Kwek-Kwek-Wap. Forced ethnic assimilation with the descendants of enslaved people came with its own challenges. They resented being grouped with us. To them, it represented an official lowering of their racial status. Meanwhile, we resented being stripped even further of our identity as South Africans and as First People. The term coloured de-Africanized, shamed and humiliated us. Being called Hotnot, Busman, Servant, Kruskop, Busmanholler, savage, baboon, gorilla, uncivilized, incapable, won't amount to much, was just a day in the life of a Khoi child growing up in a coloured area. Job reservation was taken very seriously and ensured that my mother, her relatives and friends worked in domestic servitude, as did her ancestors, while coloured mothers worked in factories earning better money. My isiXhosa father and his brothers were constantly fleeing from the Group Areas Act, the Homeland Act, the police and its coloured spies. The Inhumane Influx Control Act of 1945, barring the isiXhosa from Cape Town, hounding my father, resulted in me not speaking neither my mother or my father's native tongues. Sadly, there are currently ahistorical groups of coloured people supported by settler groups calling for the very same laws to be implemented. Much ridiculing accompanied the kicking down of our doors by armed police in pursuit of my father, who was banned from being in a coloured area and also banned from seeing his children who lived in a coloured area. My two older sisters lived with my grandmother in our ancestral home during their early childhood. Throughout my childhood, I would go home 5 or 6 times a year. On the 400 plus journey inland, the burden of rejection, shame and humiliation, forced assimilation and into the mishmash of coloured identity would dwindle. Here in this Atakwa village of people who still refer to themselves as the people with light coloured skin as they did before colonization. Here where the elders still remember Ata, meaning trader or merchant, is where I belong. On the long road to the village, safety and acceptance and familiarity would wash over me and keep me cocooned until I left again. Leaving again filled me with dread and anxiety. Leaving again was reminiscent of being thrown into the lion's den. Leaving for a place I loved so much, where there are people who I loved so much, but where I was an unwelcome savage. A place where Indigenous people are referred to as buitemense, meaning people from the outside, or boerjongens, people belonging to the white man. Here in District 6, my yellow skin was a definite curse. Here in the Herondin clan of Zuar of over 1,000 people, I was not invisible or extinct. Here, everyone knows my name and understands the scars of my soul and the ancestral features of my body. Here, where the skin color blends into the environment perfectly. These ancestral features would eventually lead my ancestors to instruct me to tell the story of the Khoi many decades later. I am because they were. It is here where no apology for my existence is necessary. Here where I didn't need shiny long hair and European features. It is here where I don't have to spend every waking second proving that I was human. Before slavery, District 6 and the Buka were sacred places of the Indigenous Khoi and San people. As Khoi, we don't know whether to laugh or to cry when we hear that it has become heritage spaces of newly arrived people. As a child in District 6, I am entitled to reparations, so I am privy to much of the discussions between the beneficiaries of District 6, where I am deliberately erased by colored people. My family was first forcibly removed from the Buka and then to Vernon Terrace in District 6, and then again after the demolitions of Vernon Terrace into Bloemer Flats, where I spent most of my childhood. The District 6 Beneficiary Trust, City of Cape Town, and national government know for a fact that there were Khoi and isiXhosa in District 6 long before forced removals. The settler blamed the black man for the 1908 bubonic plague, and they were violently frog-marched to the Cape Flats. In February 2004, Nelson Mandela handed the first key to the 12 restitution houses to an 82-year-old isiXhosa man. It is a historical fact that all enslaved people from Batavia and other Dutch colonies were not Muslim. Descendants from District 6 are notoriously racist, and the Democratic Alliance and offspring of the various political parties active during apartheid capitalizes on their prejudice and racism to keep the Cape anti-black and the Khoi invisible. Stereotypes of the Khoi and San as virtually extinct savages in South Africa has been pervasive, especially in the education system, who have reproduced and spread and sustained these harmful lies. There has been subtle changes in the way we are depicted post-apartheid, but despite the shift, insulting ideas and depictions are still produced. My home village, Zuar, is presently only recognized as the poorest community in South Africa. It is my duty to improve the lives of my people as instructed by my forebearers. Next time, I will talk about how we became invisible. Kai Gangangs for now. Cape of Storms, Table Bay, Falls Bay, Cape of Good Hope, settler, it was not yours to take. I am Atakwa, and I was born extinct.